Hey guys, welcome back to our stream. Interstage window. I did it again. I said the name
Yay!
again. All right, I'm gonna get our game going while Landon does our little introduction for today, letting
Well,
y'all know what we're
well,
gonna talk
first,
about.
first, who are you?
Oh yeah, I'm Karen. I'm Karen Terry. And welcome to the stream. We do this stream every Saturday from noon to 2, and my co-host is
I'm Landon, the omniscient voice from Beyond, let's say.
Beyond.
I was gonna say a really mythical place like, Brisbane, Australia, but I just didn't get to it.
I don't know. I think
But
Maine's pretty mythical. It's like to
yeah,
me
that's true, I
anyway. It's like
guess.
the cold frozen north, right? So that's pretty mythical to me.
It is. It's pretty rainy today and feeling nice and fallish,
Oh
so I'll take
wow.
it.
Okay. That's really
So,
cool.
yes, but welcome to our show. We're very excited to be here.
Yes.
Today we're going to be talking about uh, we've deemed it pretty people, but really it's talking about the inclusivity of writing and who you're writing, as well as being progressive, being fiction positive,
Yeah.
but also trying to be as inclusive as possible and show representation within RP.
Yeah. So it's more we are really going to talk about like representation. Really, I think that's really the main thing that we're
Yeah.
talking about, even though the topic is kind of like pretty characters. But there's reasons for that. But we'll get all into it. While everybody is kind of getting logged into the stream, let's do favorite things for this week. Landon, what was your favorite thing this week?
Okay, so I have had kind of a crazy week just in my
Oh, hey,
personal life.
Lunar. So happy to see you again.
Hi, Lunar.
Yeah, your week has been insane.
Just slightly, but what has really truly gotten me through it is a show. It's not even the show, it's the YouTube highlights of Inkmaster.
Oh, what's
Um,
Inkmaster?
so for anyone who knows me IRL, I love tattoos. I have quite a few of my own, and then I love artwork on other people. So Inkmaster is a American competition show about tattooers and tattoo artists.
Oh,
So it's basically think like chopped-ish, but for tattoos.
okay, okay. That's really cool. I mean, tattooing is something I don't have any tattoos. For y'all that don't know, I don't have any tattoos. I have a few piercings, but not tattoos. And but I do find it like some of the art like really fascinating. I
Yeah,
think tattoo artists do some really amazing work.
it's insane. And then and I mean, there's, your normal tattoo artists, which do beautiful art, but we're talking like the creme de la creme, top of the food chain tattoo artists who can like put what looks like a photograph of a landscape on your arm and then make it stay that way for the next 20 years.
Oh my
Like,
God.
really, really great tattoo artists. And also the thing about tattoo artists is that a lot of them stereotypically are raunchy and slightly violent and kind of like hot-headed and really proud of the work that they do, which they should be because it's amazing art. But you get a bunch of those in a room together and chaos can tend to erupt. So how an episode kind of works is that they're given a theme like realism, and now they have to do a kind of weird challenge like take a paintball gun and by paintball shot paint a realism photo on a giant piece of wood.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that kind of art. And then the winners of that get to like get an advantage, and then you get the elimination round, which is you're given an 6 to 8 hour block to tattoo a person and make an amazing tattoo and then have it ripped to
Oh
shreds by
God.
the judges.
I feel like you said, you get a lot of like people that are very proud and maybe a little bit raucous and violent and things like that. But I kind of feel like that's almost any group of artists.
That
Like
is
you get
100%
like
true.
you get enough of them together in the room and they get a little wild and crazy. Like
Oh my god.
no matter what. I think it
So
takes
you
a
say
certain kind of
that.
person that a certain kind of person that's really into whatever their art is, and that kind of happens naturally a little bit.
Yes. And it's funny that you say that because I was like, "Oh, now I want an RP competition."
Oh my
I have no
God.
idea what it would look like, and I don't
Yeah,
think it
how
would be
would you do
possible.
that? How would you do that?
Oh, I don't know, but I just want a group of RPers competing for $100,000 in a
Oh my
room
God.
because I think it would just turn so funny, and
It
it
really
would
would.
become an RP itself. Like, let's be honest.
Oh my gosh, it so would. I have no idea how like an RP competition would work because I feel like, RP as an art form is so subjective and it's not really something that can easily be judged like in a panel, right? Like that what's good RP, it's not the same thing as like what makes a good tattoo or a good painting or even a good piece of like fiction writing, right? It's like not the same thing. So I have no idea how that would work. But I know if it existed, you would 100% join and you would do
I would.
everything to win.
I might not be the best, but you sure as hell know that I would try to be in there and be the troublemaker who would get to the top.
Oh my God,
I just
you
can't help.
would
I just can't help myself.
you would work so hard at an RP competition. Like I could see it. I could so see
Yeah,
it.
it is competition is my middle name, which is really fortunate that I don't compete in anything other than trying to be the charmist, most funny person in a room. And oftentimes that just, I fail at that, which is what makes me charming and funny.
Hey,
So
you know what? You are my main co-host on here for a reason. So don't
that's
sell
true.
yourself short.
You're right. I gotta sell the brand. Okay, so moving on, what is your favorite thing of the week, Karen Terry?
Okay, so my favorite thing this week was Umbrella Academy. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I slept on this show when the first season was out, and like I don't know why. Like the second season came out, and like I caught a random episode with my husband while he was watching it. So for context, the clip that I saw that I was like, I don't know, this show looks really weird. I might like it. Was where Klaus goes and tells like a really crappy version of the Scorpion and the Frog parable. So
Okay.
I caught that a part of that episode and I was like, "Oh, this is that show that everyone really likes. Maybe I should give it a try." And that was like on Monday that I decided that. And I am already almost done with season 2. I'm on like episode 7 of season 2. Oh my God. I freaking love this show. I freaking love this show. Okay, Luther is my son. He deserves the world. Anybody that disagrees, there's the door. Bye.
Ooh, hot take.
I love him, and this show is everything that I like. Right? It's got that oeuvre of problematique. Everyone is awful, right? In this show,
Yep.
it's all about trauma, like even the second season, like the first season, of course, I don't know how much how spoilery this is going to be. I'm not going to give you like spoilers for the show, but give
Okay.
you an idea. The first season, it's a superhero show, but what it's really all about is trauma, right? So in the first
Mhm.
season, it's these kids were adopted and their adopted father made basically a superhero group out of them and he was awful to them. He was just really awful to them because he didn't treat them as kids, he treated them as trainees, right, to build this superhero group. And that's what
Yes.
the first season is really about. It's about, these kids coming together as adults after their adoptive father has passed away. And that's not a spoiler, that's like episode 1. And how they deal with it and the different ways that what he did to them affected them as they grew up, and so that's really what it's all about. And then the second season, I feel like it's a lot about like global traumas that we've all been through. So for those that haven't seen the second season, there's a bunch of different things that are taking place. There's time travel in the show because of course there is this freaking comic book. And they do all the weird comic book tropes, but in the second season, it takes place during like the civil rights movement is going on during the second season. During the second season is also when Kennedy was shot. And I feel like there's a couple other examples too. Oh yeah, one of the characters goes through what it's like to try to be gay during that time. So it's I feel like the second season is about not just their individual trauma, but traumas that we all as a society have gone through in America and a lot of the stuff that we're still dealing with, right? So even though this season takes place mostly in the past, not the present, all of those things I think are quite relevant to today and what we're going through today. So that's my favorite thing this week.
Okay.
Umbrella Academy. If you love like tropey comic book stuff, watch it. If you love problematic stuff, watch it. It's wonderful.
So you just sold me on it. Like I've heard it was great. Like that's the other thing too, is that everyone who's watched it has not said a single bad thing about it.
Oh, it's so good. It's so
But
good. Like my gripes with it are so tiny and minimal. It's so good.
I have a very weird brain where I have to like, work up a year and a half to 2 years to watch anything new. Unless it's actively on TV and unless I can be like, you know what, I'm gonna do it all in one sitting.
Rewatch is only
Because
for Landon.
a little bit. The amount I've watched Gilmore Girls and what's call it? I was gonna say Gossip Girl, as well as like The Vampire Diaries.
Oh, of
Just
course.
it's actually pretty terrible.
The old staples,
But
right?
um but now that you've sold it as like trauma and everything tropey and everything that you could possibly love about storytelling, I'm
Yeah.
I'm kind of really into it. That sounds fantastic.
It's really good. I swear it's got all of your favorite things. Like whatever your favorite problematic ship is, whatever your favorite
Okay, but
disaster storyline is, it's got it. It's got a version of it. Whatever you want.
here's the real question: is that there's there a bad boy, preferably blonde, somewhat tall, redeemable character? Because that's what
Yes.
sells me.
Yes, but he's brunette. So I would say
Oh,
that's
oh, so
probably
close.
Klaus. He's the one that deals with his trauma via lots of drugs and alcohol,
Oh,
right?
my favorite.
Yeah, so I think you'll probably love Klaus, and he's absolutely one of the fan favorites. So yes, there is. He's sweet on the inside, but he keeps doing awful things because he can't quit his addictions.
I love it so
He's doing his best. He's doing his best.
much. As we can only expect and ask for characters to do is their best, even if it's terrible, wrong, and corrupt.
Exactly. I mean, right.
Well, I am glad. That sounds like a wonderful favorite thing.
Yeah, it's great. So I'm gonna probably finish it sometime this week. Like I'm tearing through it. I'm just tearing through it. Pretty much
Okay,
any time that I have a work assignment where I don't have to pay like super attention, I'm like putting it on, you know. So I'll be done with it very soon.
love it. You'll have to give us a quick update next week about if the full of season 2 lived up to the hype.
Yeah, remind me, and I definitely will.
Sounds good. All right. Shall we move into the topic?
Yeah. Let's go. So give us a rundown. How are we doing this? Let everybody know kind of how we're starting this topic. And this is a pretty heavy topic, right? This is a pretty heavy
Yes.
topic. So before we actually do that, I just want to tell everybody, like, we are talking about, representation in every word that might mean. We'll probably mention various things that might be upsetting to hear or problematic for you and what you go through with these types of issues. So this is your content warning here. If you are particularly sensitive about these things, proceed with caution. I am not perfect. I am not the most woke. Landon, I'm sure you feel the same way.
Absolutely.
We are not the wokest. We might say things or have opinions that that are upsetting for you. So that's my blanket statement. So nothing we're gonna say is on purpose upsetting, but these are sensitive topics, so it might
Yeah,
happen.
and I also think it's important to draw attention that we both are extremely aware that we are white
Yeah,
cis females,
yeah,
living in a fairly rich country.
yeah,
So we know that we are not necessarily the spokespeople of um, oppressed people, and we're not
yeah,
trying to be. We're simply trying to have an inclusive conversation. And if there is someone out there in the chat or who is going to be watching the VOD later or listening to the um, on Spotify that wants to send us a message or email us or anything about having this conversation, and if you are part of the communities that we talk about, we will gladly listen
yeah,
and add to the conversation list later if you're willing to be a part of it. So,
yeah. Happy to hear from anybody like that, absolutely, because we're always
absolutely.
trying to learn, right?
Yep,
And I know that no marginalized group is a monolith, right? So having additional
absolutely.
perspectives, I think, is always helpful.
Yes. So, I think that a good place to start is kind of tying this into how this affects RP and where the very base level of it is.
Hmm.
And so it kind of goes into choosing the characters we do and the visual representation of those characters.
Yes. Okay.
So, kind of talking about face claims. I
Hmm.
know not every single RP has versions of face claims. I think that they're fairly popular within the RP community, but I know that there are certainly RPs that do not have that.
Yeah.
But how that kind of contributes to and can be a problem that if we're choosing very popular face claims to represent all of our characters, what that leads to.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, welcome, welcome to the stream, Collectivon fan. Hope you didn't miss our content warning that we just had. We are going to be talking about some heavy topics today. But yeah, I do think let's start with how this affects us when it comes to role play. So
Yes.
we do use face claims. We use real people face claims. So just to give you some guidelines on how we do our face claims, for one, they have to be real people, right? And they have to be in the public eye. So you can't be like yourself as a face claim, or an Instagram person with 100 followers as a face claim, right? Like they have to be legitimately in the public eye. And
Yeah, I think
then
we agreed that like 100,000 followers on Instagram is our
yeah,
very, very minimum.
yeah, right. We really do want, D-list and up celebrities. We really, there are certain people that are like celebrities, right, that might fall below that, but we really don't want to bother anybody with that that doesn't feel like of significant, putting themselves out there into the public. I don't
Yeah,
think
they're
that's
not a
right.
public figure or
Yeah, like
consider themselves a public figure.
yeah, like I don't think that's right. So that's kind of our guidelines. And the other thing is that we don't allow face claims of deceased people, and that's purely our own comfort, right? Like when it comes to these face claim rules, it has nothing to do with like rightness or wrongness or anything like that. It really has to do with like what we enjoy and what we are comfortable with, and that's it. That's like the beginning and the end of it, right? There's no right way or wrong way. It's just our way.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
and so when I role play, considering that's basically how I do face claims and that's how I think of them, um, then when I role play, I am imagining myself stepping into this world where everyone is gorgeous, everyone is sexy, everybody is like a CW show, right? So to me, like when I'm joining a role play, I am stepping into this CW show where everybody is beautiful and like diverse and young, and like even the people that are old look gorgeous, you know what I mean? So like, and that's not the real world.
Absolutely.
That is not the real world at all. But that's what I'm doing when I step into a role play. I'm entering this fantasy world where everybody is gorgeous.
Yeah, I think that I imagine it that it's not necessarily the rule that everyone is gorgeous, but we as people are attracted to attracted people and what we are told are attractive people,
Uh-huh.
and that tends and celebrities stereotypically tend to fall within those guidelines
Yep.
of who is attractive. Um Now of course there are examples of that which that is not the case, but for the most part Hollywood tells us what is attractive and therefore we listen to it. And if
Mm-hmm.
we're also our rules are to only pick from Hollywood celebrity types, then it's just going to be really attractive people.
It just kind of happens naturally with those rules, right?
Yes, exactly. Um but I think that that's okay, especially when in RP we talk about how a lot of characters are either derived from fandom or they can be even considered be OCs derived in some way from fandom
Mm-hmm.
and that's not original OCs, I guess, but taking a character like Elijah and putting him into another world kind of turns him into an OC.
Right. Like, and we've
And so you're
talked about that kind of doing that kind of thing before. So I mean, y'all that are regular listeners and regular viewers, like that we're doing that. So I'm sure it kind of like, oh, very obvious, duh. Of course they do it that way, right?
yes, exactly. So that is going to what is popular, and the genres that are popular also tend to lend itself to really pretty people.
Yep.
And being like, and CW being a great example of that. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of what we
um,
do is very CW-esque, right? Like we're very dramatic, full of
absolutely.
gorgeous people, right?
Well, yeah, and I mean, frankly, even if it wasn't CW-esque, for the most part, you look at any TV show, even if it's not CW. Yes, we like to be dramatic. Yes, our characters tend to be younger. But if you look at any TV show on Fox or ABC or anything like that, they're filled with pretty people too.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Um, the ugly people tend to be, either villains or extras
Yeah, I
or
mean that's
dead in cop shows.
yeah, that's I mean that's pretty much how Hollywood works, right? So, considering how we do our face claims, that's a very natural way to end up. And, because role play is a lot of fantasy, it's a lot of like, that cognitive dissonance between myself and the character, then then we end up in a situation where, of course I want to play like something a little bit more idealized, right, than reality.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
um I don't think that there is necessarily anything wrong with that. I think that the issue starts is that because there is an issue with how we can acknowledge that there is an issue on how Hollywood tends to say that pretty people are, young and skinny and white for
Yep.
the most part.
Yeah.
And because we are taking lead and following by example and falling in love with face claims and celebrities who are who fill that sort of criteria, we then continue and bring it into the RP
Yeah,
and into the RP world.
and that happens very naturally, right? Like I think
Oh,
it
absolutely.
takes a little extra it takes a little extra effort, right, to not fall into that, right? To do something a little different. Um
Yes.
and it's just because of the world that we live in, right? So we are creating role plays and engaging in role plays, while the background of the real world is happening, right? So we're
Yes.
subject to all of those same pressures that everyone else is, right? Um, so we end up in with that situation, and as far as that goes, then we're going to be subject to those pressures too, right? Like I'm not going to pretend that Hollywood has no influence on me and what I think is beautiful, because it does.
Yeah, exactly. It has a huge effect on that, and it also has a lasting effect on whether we're consciously aware of it or not, on making those who look like the people that are beautiful also feel comfortable with that, like,
Yeah,
label. So it's very much, it's just part of the racism that lives within our society.
yeah, and
And
within all of
exists.
us, and within all of
Yeah,
us.
and with all of us,
Hmm.
absolutely, and us being part of that culture and everything
Yeah.
like that.
So yeah, there's a lot of, and I would say that there's definitely, internalized racism going on there,
Yes.
internalized fat phobia in particular going on there because of, what Hollywood shows us and what our society shows us.
Yeah, and I feel like that's not necessarily a and I think because of that, having that the FCs and the face claims kind of bridges that, but it's not unique to that. I
Yeah.
think because we have that idea, even if FCs didn't exist, even if you drew FCs, because I know um certain RPs do that where you can draw your character
Yep.
or you can just imagine what your character looks like. A lot of them are going to follow those same rules.
Yeah, you're still going to end up most likely with a role play full of skinny young white people. Like
Yes.
that's just probably what's going to happen. So I think it takes a little extra effort to make that diversity feel welcome,
Yes.
because you're going to end up with a role play majority that I do believe no matter what you do. So you have to make sure that you put in things that allow for people that do want that more diverse experience to still feel welcome and still feel like people can be excited about their characters, which is still possible, which is totally still possible, because we're going to get into how we do some certain things to make that possible.
I
But it
actually
does
think
take a
that
little
would
extra effort.
Yeah, like let's talk about that. I think that
Okay.
would be a good transition is how I think that there are two things there's ways you can do it. As mod doing it as a mod and doing it as a player. So let's talk first
Hmm.
about how as a mod we can have representation within an RP and make sure that there is that little bit of welcomeness to that.
Yeah. So one thing that I do as a moderator is I think a lot about how I set up the character applications to make sure that people who want to play those more diverse characters feel welcome. So for example, when you're applying for a character in one of my role plays, we're going to ask for the name of the character, the age of the character, and then their history and their personality and some stuff like that, right? We don't have anyone fill out on an application what their character's gender is, what their character's sexuality is, what their character's pronouns are, what their character's height and weight are, right? And I've seen all of that stuff. I've seen all of that stuff asked for on applications in other role plays. And I believe the act of asking that I believe the act of asking that kind of puts people in this awkward position because to me, like if your character's ethnicity or your character's weight or something like that is important to that character, well, you're going to put it in the history. I don't need a special field. I don't need a special field that says what your character's pronouns are or what your character's gender is. If your character is trans and that's important to your character, it's going to show up in the history, right? So that's
Yeah.
one way that I think is really important. I think we need to really think about, when you talk about labels that people use, asking for them in an application, I think can give a certain impression this not so good. So I am more in favor of not asking those types of things on an application and instead just asking for the character's history. And if it's important to that character, the player will put it in the history. Like I guarantee you they will. So you don't need to have people label their characters as, straight or gay or bi or whatever, right? Like I just don't think that's necessary. They'll put it in the application if it's important to the character. And if it's not important to the character, well, then they don't have to worry about it, right? Because
Or
people
they'll
should not
discover it at some point.
Right, because people should not be defined by those types of things, right? We should be focusing on making interesting characters that we connect with. We shouldn't be focusing on like ticking boxes, right, when we're making characters.
Yes. I
So that's one way.
agree. I agree with that in a whole. I think that if someone wanted to do that, I can understand this idea of having those boxes and having that be on an application kind of being a flashing reminder of inclusivity and
Yeah.
things like that.
And
It
I'm sure
doesn't
that's the
always come
intent.
across.
I'm sure that's the
Oh yeah,
intent, right?
and I don't think it always comes across that way, unfortunately, because a lot
Hmm.
of people will look at the weight box and go, okay, Google what is an average weight
And
for a 6'3"
then just
white
pop it in,
male
right? And then
who's
just pop
yeah.
it in.
Or like, or it's going to be some girl who might be overweight and is writing and wants to write as a skinny girl who's going to, write a dream number that might not actually even make any sense.
Which that happens all the
Or
time too. You'll get like these girls, these female characters that are 5'5", 100 pounds, and it's like, no, you are not. No, you are not.
yeah. Also, if that's your FC, not with those boobs.
Right? So I think when you ask those things on an application, it opens up the floodgates for people to, I don't know, I guess the best way I can say it is quote unquote do it wrong, which I don't believe that there's anything that you can do wrong when you're just writing and being creative, but at the same time, like you open yourself up to that judgment with things that aren't even important to your character, right?
Yes.
So, and I don't like that. I would rather judge a character based on what the writer says is like important to that character.
I agree. And I think that the way that if you are fostering an RP correctly and you are making interesting, diverse characters as
Hmm.
mods, that will also attract people who are willing and want to make interesting, diverse characters as
Absolutely.
players.
Absolutely. Like I think about us as mods and something that I'm really interested in, and it's always being welcome to older characters. Because I feel like in a
Yes.
lot of role plays, if you make a character over 30, nobody's interested, which I don't like that. Obviously, as somebody over 30, that hurts. So I think, the mods coming in and making characters of those ages helps. And I'm sure it's the same way with other groups. That if you feel that if you go into a role play and you see moderators playing characters that are that are black or that are trans, or pick your thing that's typically
Yes.
not super popular, and you see mods playing those characters, like it feels like welcoming, right? So I
Absolutely.
totally agree. I totally agree. Like leading by example is important here.
Yeah. And also, we talk about how there are only so many mysterious strangers one can handle in a bar. as a character, as like having a character in an RP. There's only so many skinny white girls between the ages of 18 and 23
I mean, it's
that an
true.
RP can handle.
It's true. Like, I mean, I'm not, I don't want to knock on people that want to play those characters. Like, I have one too, Abigail, that I've talked about many times on stream.
Sandra,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, I have them too, but when you get a role play together, and we've encountered this before, we've had role plays where we've realized, hey, this role play is filled of the same character 6 times, and it starts to get kind of
Yeah.
like, it starts to feel boring, like, to me. Like, I'm just going to be honest, like, and this is, it just feels boring. Like, I look at it and I'm like, why do we have the same character 6 times? Why do we have the exact same look 6 times? And it's
There
not
aren't this many redheads in the world. Why do we
right.
have that many in this RP?
I mean, and sometimes it's a meme you can embrace, right? And sometimes
Absolutely. Oh,
sometimes
I
it's
love it.
fine, but at the same time, like, it also makes me feel like there's so much room for more. Let's push ourselves to do more and do better.
Yes. And I think also another example as mods to do that is that in our RPs we have pre-written characters.
Yeah.
And so not only do we take diverse characters as mods, and by the way, we take diverse characters because we want to play diverse characters, not because we're like, oh man, someone should play, the old character and someone needs to play the person of color. And like, we want to explore these storylines.
You know what? And
Um,
Landon, I disagree. I purely do it for woke points on the internet. You know,
yep.
give me them.
That's what you're really trying to get in a small private group RP is woke points.
Right, like, I need these 15 people to know I'm super woke.
That you are okay with playing someone who's over 30 years old.
Holy crap, yeah.
You're amazing. And they're a vampire? Who knew?
Wow. Wow, so diverse. But yeah,
So
no,
cool.
you're right. We're not when I write a character that's not like me, I'm not doing it as like an exercise to pat me on the back and tell me how awesome I am, right? I'm doing
Yeah.
it because part of why I role play is because I really enjoy the aspect of researching and trying to write something that's not me. I already play me in real life, you know?
Yeah.
I play me in real life. I don't need to play Karen Terry in a role play. I don't.
I've I've been a blonde girl in her 20s. I don't need that right now.
Right?
But I agree with that. But also in our RP, making sure that we are reminding, like, creating characters for the people who don't have ideas when they come into the RP or who
Yep.
are looking for what we need, creating diverse characters. So our list of cast isn't, young and white. Our
Yep.
list of cast that is available and that we're looking for are people of color and are diverse ages
Mhm.
and experiences and mental health issues. Even we try to
Yeah.
write into there.
Yeah.
um it's important that as mods we also set up the RP for success, and even having a subtle sort of, hey, we are looking for diverse people within this RP is
Mhm.
important.
Yeah. So to give a little bit more detail for those that are not super familiar with how we do things in our role plays, in addition to being able to just make your own character of whatever you want, we always start out our role plays with probably about 10 to 12, depending on the role play, of pre-made characters. And those are characters that we wrote up just a little bit on to give some people inspiration, because it's not always easy when you're first joining a role play to know exactly what you want to play. And that exists for people that are just like, well, I really want to join this role play, but I really don't know what kind of character I want to play. You can look through those characters and see if there's anything there that sparks your interest, where that makes you say like, oh, well, this character sounds kind of neato. Maybe I can take this character that the mods have created and put a little bit of my own spin on them, and then I can join this role play and I can, make my dream character later, right? So
Yeah.
it's just take the reason why we do it is to take the pressure off of new players, because you're making like a gajillion decisions when you first join a role play, right? So it's one less decision that you have to make out of a piece of blank paper, right?
Yeah, and I think I kind of want to mention this story of sometimes what has happened is that we've had people who try to pick up characters and then want to change the FC, and
Yeah.
that change also involves changing the race of the
Yeah.
FC. So if we've picked a diverse person of color to play a certain character, and that person tries to change that character to white, we will sit there and be like, no.
Yeah, we typically don't allow that. We typically don't allow that because we picked, a person of color on purpose for
And
that
also that's
particular character.
yep, and also like no.
Yeah. Like I guess we can talk about that a little because it doesn't come up. There's another place that it comes up too. We have had people like try to create like the same look over and over. Like if you already have a
Yes.
character that has a certain look, like we're gonna probably tell you like, okay, for your next character, you need to do something a little different. Your first character already looked like, generic Instagram model, which is fine. Like if you want to play that, that's fine. We'll let you have that character. It's no problem. But you can't make your second character also generic Instagram model, right? You got to
Yeah, and
do something different.
I think that's something that we do actually on a wider scale as well, like without even talking about FCs with that. As mods, we look at the characters you have and you play. We're not even looking at the storylines that you're playing. But if like for our current one, we have a rule that you're not allowed your fourth character cannot if you have three characters of the same gender,
Yep.
your fourth character cannot be that gender.
Right.
You need to have a diverse and we do that for multiple of reasons because characters can if you're playing four men, those characters can start to bleed together really quickly. They can start
Hmm.
sounding the same.
Yeah.
Same thing with with four women. We want to see a little bit of diversity, but it's also to encourage our players to play outside of their box that they're obviously comfortable in.
Right? Like when you see somebody that is like a cis woman in their reality and they want to make a fourth character and this fourth character is also, a cis woman and we look at all their characters and it's like, "Hey, you're doing the same thing over and over with your gender. Let's expand that a little bit. Maybe play a dude, maybe play someone non-binary, right?"
Yes.
Like there's more out there and that's like just a gentle nudge from us, to say like we want you to write as many characters as you want, but we do have a diversity value that we want to have, and like we want to push you just a little bit, you know
Yes.
because most of us are fairly experienced role players. We attract fairly experienced role players, so that means like for the most part the people that join our role plays are going to be fairly comfortable with just a little nudge, a little push, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have many people in our RPs, or have had many people in our RPs, who have talked about that they've never played, like they're cis men who have never played a woman before.
Mm-hmm.
And then we ask them to because they've, reached character number 3 and they're thinking about character number 4, and we're like, yo, we got to mix it up. And they'll talk about that they're nervous or they're not the most comfortable with it, but they'll try and then they rock it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, I don't know why we never did this before.
Yeah, we've had that happen a couple of times. And I think that's another thing too, is like giving people room to screw up is really important
Yes.
from a moderator perspective, right? Like if you're in that situation, like you just said, like you're a dude and you're playing a female character for the first time, um, giving them permission to not do it right and not be like just destroyed over it. Like we're never as mods gonna contact a player and be like, hey, this character doesn't seem female to us, right? Because a woman can be whatever you
Yeah.
want, right?
Who
Like
are we
it's
to police what is female and what is not? And
right,
also, who
like
are we to police what you can and cannot do with your character for the most part?
right, that's not our jobs, right? That's not our jobs as mods. So we're never going to do that. And I think making sure that your players know that they are free to do things, quote unquote wrong, right? Like in the
Mhm.
example of a dude playing a girl, like if you want to write that she bounced boobily down the stairs, right? To quote the meme, like I mean, we're probably going to be like a little bit but we're going to let you, right?
We
And we're not going to make you feel like you're a bad person for doing that. Like
Yeah.
you didn't know better. I'm assuming the best that you didn't do that on purpose to make me feel like, marginalized. I'm going to
Yeah,
assume that you didn't
the
do it on
modern
purpose.
the mod in me is not gonna blink an eye. The feminist in me might like roll my eyes a little bit and just be
But
like,
privately.
"Oh,
But like
sir."
privately, right? And it's and
Oh,
and
100%.
and they're trying, right? They're trying. So I just don't see that as something that's like, a problem. They're doing their best and I'm going to assume that they're doing their best.
Yeah, and I think also having we also in our RPs don't shy away from having out of character conversations that are have depth and meaning to them. So we've
Yeah.
talked about in our OOC chats, talked about race problems
Yeah.
before. We've talked about sexism before. And that, I think conversations like that, much like they would in real life or real life conversations,
Hmm.
have also helped expand and open people's eyes to certain things. I'm not saying that we've changed people,
Yeah,
but
I don't think we've done that, but
no, absolutely. But I think that, like, I can remember I can remember a specific writer who kind of talked about, writing boobily down the stairs. And then, like, we talked about having a very, like, conversation about, I don't know, it was about periods or something in the chat. And then kind of that sexualization of the character itself stopped a little bit, not completely. That writer is never changed forever, but moving forward and having open, honest conversations, I think, is also part of an important part of our community. And as mods, we should foster that both in character and out of character.
yeah, like make people feel like it's okay to make mistakes, and we're not going
Yeah.
to pick on you for it, right?
It's also
And
okay not to engage in the conversation if you don't want to as well.
absolutely, absolutely, it's totally okay. Like if you're not comfortable, it's totally okay.
We're not going to stop having the conversation just because you're not comfortable, but we
But you don't have to
certainly
engage.
but if you don't want to engage in it, you certainly don't have to.
Yeah.
I think as mods, we would call them out if they tried to change the subject while there was a conversation happening, and we've done that.
Yeah, but I
Um,
think that's the closest we would ever come to something like that. And the reason why we'd call that out is totally different. It's more like about, hey, let people talk about what they want to talk about, you know.
exactly. But I think that that is an important. I think that is an important aspect of having representation and diversity within RPs as a mod, is that you do foster that sort of communication and
Yeah.
those sort of topics if you're comfortable with it.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Um, do you have any ideas as a player? I know it's kind of hard sometimes to take our mods hats off, especially
I
because we've been
know,
doing
because we've
it
been
for so
doing it for
long.
so long. Yeah,
But as a
exactly.
player, are there things that you can do to bring or make sure that there is representation
So what
within your characters, but also maybe even within the RP that you're playing in?
Yeah, so what I would say as a player, and what I always really appreciate seeing players do in our games, and something that I try to do on the rare chance that I join someone else's game, is like if there is a character that is like a little bit more marginalized, and I notice that they're not really getting much attention from other characters, which that totally happens, right? Because let's not pretend, for a lot of people role playing is about shipping. It is,
Yes.
right? And not no, not everybody wants to ship with a character that's not their beauty ideals. And so, when I see a player that's like playing one of those characters that is less likely to get a ship because either they are playing like an older character, they're playing an overweight character. I don't see this so much with POC characters. I think in role play, some POC characters struggle to get ships, but not as often as like older characters or overweight characters, right? But when I see that, I try to make sure that I offer plots to them to say like, hey, let's have our characters be friends, or hey, are you looking for any certain plots, or things of that nature. I think is really helpful from a player perspective, because the mods can only do so much, right? And I'm sure that as a player, if you realize that you're only getting attention from the mods and no one else is really interested, like that can't feel so good, right? Like that can't feel
Yeah.
so good. So as a player, that's what I try to do. If I think someone is like, hey, this person seems cool, but nobody seems interested in their character, then maybe I reach out and I say, hey, I've got this plot idea. I would love to have your characters help with it. Or, hey, are there any plots you're interested in? I love so and so, and I want to role play more with them, or something like that. I think
Yeah.
is really helpful from a player's perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that. Um, I also think for me is recognizing that as an ally, I have a duty to also uh, play marginalized people.
Yeah,
Like, that if I'm going to want to see change within the roleplay community and I'm going to want to see more diversity, I gotta walk the talk.
yeah.
Um, and I actually kind of wanted to talk about a mistake I've made as far as this has gone,
Oh, sure,
that
yeah.
I've realized, because I played a character whom I still love to this day, named Naima,
Mm-hmm.
and she is an older character and was wonderful, and her spirit animal was an elephant.
Mm-hmm.
named Moana, and I realized halfway through playing her that I was using Swahili words and language, and I had a soul animal that was from Africa, and Neema was white,
Yeah, so maybe she
and
shouldn't have been,
she
right?
shouldn't have been. And I mean, Neema is a Swahili name, and I should have recognized that right off the bat, that I was making a character with a face claim I was comfortable with and that I loved, but she was white, and
Yeah.
I shouldn't have been stealing a culture, and I should have taken the opportunity to sit there and be like, no, this character is actually black and should be black and will be black next time.
I mean,
But really,
I think that's one of those things where we say like the racism lives inside us, right?
oh yeah,
And that's a really good example of that where we make like stupid mistakes and you look back and it's like that was so dumb. That character was obviously black and I didn't let them be because I chose a face claim that I was comfortable with, and that's not what I should have done. I should have taken the time to do a little bit more research and find a face claim that I liked that matched more closely with what this character clearly was in the writing.
absolutely. And I should have not been uncomfortable with it, or because I don't think I wasn't actively uncomfortable with it, but it was certainly in me that I was like, oh man, I love it wasn't Meryl Streep. I don't even remember who it was who I had play her at this point. Anyway,
Yeah, I don't
and
remember
that's
either
how
to be quite honest.
to
Like
be
I
quite
don't.
honest. I love the character. The FC obviously didn't fit enough for her to stand out in my mind. So she should have been a different FC.
Yeah.
And as an ally, I'm going to sit there and be like, well, that's good to know, to add to my repertoire of no, this character needs to be diverse, and I need to own up to that mistake,
Yeah.
and also make an valiant effort. She is too pure to play in Atlantis, which is why she never
Yeah,
came
no,
in.
she's
But
way too nice.
I sure as hell am bringing her into the next version of whatever RP we might do one day in the future, because she deserves to live her glorious, diverse life, as the FC that is she truly deserves to be. Uh,
Yeah.
but I think that as a player, it's important to realize that you have a duty to recognize that diversity needs to come from the inside, and you can't just expect everybody else to change.
Yep.
You need to play if you really want to be and speak on diversity and be an ally and everything like that, you need to be the change.
Yeah.
Especially if you are a white RPer who plays prominently white characters.
Yeah, and I think that expecting it to all be shouldered, expecting it to all be shouldered by the particular group that is hurt by the fact that things aren't diverse, I don't think that's right. And I know that people talk a lot about like write what you know, and I do agree with that. But you know, as a writer, I think it's also important to you know bring about other stories. Like I'll mention in particular a really wonderful author. If you guys don't know, Ursula K Le Guin.
Mm.
She's like a fantasy science fiction writer, and her father was somebody who studied you know African Americans, I think it was, or maybe it was just Africa. I can't remember, but he was a scholar, right? He was an academic. So she from a very early age recognized that while white people are the majority in the sense that they have a lot of power, right? Like we have a lot of power in a lot of areas of the world,
Mhm.
we are not actually the majority in the world. So when you create a fantasy world or a science fiction world, having it be majority populated by white people is actually not realistic. It's not. Like, it's
Yeah.
not realistic. Just think about it. Like, how many billions of people are in the US versus China and India? Right? Like, just the
Yeah.
numbers do not, like, the numbers don't add up that way. They don't. And so she would create her worlds where, you know, other skin tones and other ethnicities than European white analogs were more prominent. Like not that European white analogs don't exist in her stories, they do, but they're not like you know the most prominent, the end all be all, and other groups are kind of like you know off there in Dorne. Sorry, yeah, I know that's like a slight little shade for Game of Thrones, but like it's appropriate. It's appropriate.
Yes, it is.
So little Ursula K Le Guin tangent there, but
We love it.
but you know, I think that she does a lot of good modeling for allyship, And I find that her perspectives on a lot of that stuff very helpful as somebody who's trying their damnedest, to be an ally to marginalized people, to be actually
Yeah.
like anti-racist and anti, fat phobia, and not just say like I support those people, but actually be like anti, you know, those things.
Yeah. I like the fat phobia is really really interesting. Um because it's something I obviously, as a woman who I consider myself and society would consider myself fat, um it's very interesting to like sit there and be like, wow, I have never played a fat character.
That is really
And
interesting.
I don't think I've ever seen, I can't think of an instance where I would consider a fat character to be what I would consider successful within an RP.
Yeah, I think that's a group
Because
that really, really gets a bad rap when it comes to role play. Um,
yeah,
you know,
I think because also finding a celebrity who is deemed attractive but also fat is almost a laugh within itself because I don't think a lot of people that we would deem celebrities are fat. They're
yeah,
just curvy or have like any sort of
or what we call
anything
like
on them.
what we call like Hollywood fat, right? Like I
Yeah,
do think there's a
a
difference.
size 6.
Yeah. Like I do think there's a difference between like when I think about people that I know in my real life that consider themselves fat versus like when I see a quote unquote fat actor or fat actress, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, hey Ty. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you're back. We haven't seen
Hi,
we
Ty.
haven't seen Ty for a couple of weeks. So I was excited to see.
Miss you.
We did miss you. We have missed you. Yeah, we're talking about some pretty heavy topics today, by the way. So just a reminder, again, if this makes anybody uncomfortable, we understand. We try our best, but we are not the super wokest. So we very well might
Oh
say
no.
some things that hurt feelings. And so yeah, this is your content warning.
We are not meaning to. We
Yeah,
are not actively trying to hurt anybody's
it's
feelings.
not intentional. It's not intentional. It's just like we've said before, the racism and the misogyny and all of it, like it lives inside us.
Yep.
But yeah, like I agree. I feel like that group in particular, it's really tough. It's really tough in role
Me
plays, and that's a group that we don't do a good job on that I think we could do better.
this I'm like this conversation is making me think that we need fat characters in our next RP.
We probably do. We probably do. Like and because like
I need to play a fat character.
we probably do. Like we probably need to think about that because we don't do a good job with that. Like we do a pretty good job when it comes to race. We do a good
Yes.
job when it comes to gender, but I feel like
And
weight.
we do a good job when it comes to sexuality
Oh, we
too.
do a very good job when it
Um,
comes to
and I
sexuality.
think players naturally do that
Yeah.
too because at least in my experience, a lot of our peers, especially women, our
Uh-huh.
peers are queer,
Yeah. So
are
we
very pro queer.
absolutely they're either queer themselves or they have grown up with queer fiction,
Yeah.
or things of that nature. So I feel like gay characters and bi characters don't struggle in the same way that gay people and bi people struggle in real life in role play scenes, which is
Yes.
just it's a funny thing to see. But I think if you're right, I think it's because a lot of role players are queer themselves or very very pro queer for one reason or another.
But yeah, no, fat phobia exists a huge amount for all the same reason within RPs for all the same reasons that
Hmm.
racism and sexism and even homophobia a little bit does as well.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, we although I don't think that gay and bi characters get too bad of a rap when it comes to
Yeah.
role play, there are LGBT characters that do. Like I do think there's a little bit more struggle for trans characters and non-binary
I
characters,
was
for
gonna say
example.
in all the years that we have been playing RP, I can think of
Very few,
one.
right? Very few.
I can think of a few, but I can think of one that was truly played successfully.
Yeah.
Um, and I think like as far as and especially some of the earlier ones where trans was still very, very taboo.
Yeah.
So it just is it's very interesting that that is also missing. However, gender identity is becoming as society gets used to the idea of it being more in flux.
Mm-hmm.
RP is certainly following that, if
Yeah.
not leading that sort of way of thinking too.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful for that as somebody like I'm a cis woman, right? But like being a cis woman has never really done anything good for me. Like
Oh,
it's
Ty, we're
tough.
gonna get into that.
Yeah, we are going to get into that. I think we should probably talk about that next about
Yeah, we
disabilities
can move on.
and mental health. But yeah, real quick on the gender thing. Like I am definitely a woman. I enjoy being a woman. That's my identity. but it's never done me any favors, right? There are absolutely huge swaths of my life that would have been infinitely easier if I was not a woman. You know what I mean? So to see gender inclusivity being more embraced by the role play community, like that's on to me, that's only a good thing because it helps. It's helpful even for me as somebody who is, you know, very comfortable with their gender. Um,
I
so for those that don't know, I during the beginning of my career, I worked in software and IT, and so yeah, being a woman was really hard. And that beginning of my career, there was a lot of areas that sucked that would not have sucked if I was a dude, right? So and I don't do so well with labels. Like for y'all that know me, I don't like labels. I resist them even
no
when they
way.
apply, and so
How
you
very
know
leftist of
I know,
you.
right? So more fluidity in gender is like, yes, I'm for it. I want that. I hope that someday we live in a world where gender is not like a big deal and we can be like in a post-gender world. I don't think that's realistic for my lifetime, but I would love that.
Without getting too much on that tangent, I find labels to be comfort for a lot of people who are
Yeah.
marginalized,
Yeah.
and I can respect it on that level 100%. My problem is when for me, I should also clarify that I am part of the LGBT community. I'm queer. And so for me, I personally view like when we start pigeonholing and trying to find a label that fits us to a T, that starts to be more exclusive than inclusive.
Oh yeah.
Um,
That's
so
probably
it
true.
almost swings the other way when we're sitting there and being like, well, are you really a lesbian because you've slept with a man?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or that are you really a lesbian because you have a partner who is a trans woman?
Yeah.
And that could involve that person having a penis.
Yeah.
So like
And
there
that's
is a
so
whole bunch of,
wrong. That's so
and it is,
wrong.
and it's a
Like,
whole,
cuz
but I think that that's,
I still get to sleep with a woman and be straight, so that's wrong. Like that shouldn't
yep.
be if you want to say you're a lesbian, you should be able to say that, regardless of your past.
So that's the unfortunate thing about labels is that there is a lot of gatekeeping.
Yeah.
I know from experience within the LGBT community, but I know that gatekeeping very much also exists within race communities,
Yeah.
and within ableism and like people who have learning disabilities. That are
Mhm.
you dyslexic enough to be considered dyslexic,
Oh
or and
yeah.
it can become very toxic. So I think it is very good, but we can also swing way into the wrong.
Mhm.
Um, the Ty says, I think that the same thing, that there's a tendency to cling too much to labels and for people to think I can't do X because I'm Y and restrict themselves.
A
Absolutely.
hundred
Um,
percent.
and especially when you are young and or new to a community, or like especially if you've just figured out that, hey, I might not be straight, I might be bi, having that ability to explore your sexuality or having ability to explore any sort of gender expression is a huge important part. And if you are sitting there and being like, well, bi is the label I am and so I have to be this forever,
Yeah,
how are
that's
you
not
going to ever
true.
figure out if that's actually what you want?
That's not true. I mean, I'm 34,
Yeah,
33 at this point. I kind of forget. Yes, I'm at that age where I forget how old I am. I have to count and make sure. But I think I'm
it's okay. I'm
34.
like 26, 27, somewhere in there.
And you know, I'm still growing and changing. I'm still growing and
Exactly.
changing all the time. And so that's why I resist labels because I've never found a label that lasts for me for a very long time. They always
Yeah.
change and they always like fluctuate. So that's my resistance to it. But I think we could probably do a whole talk about gender and
Yes.
sexuality and that. So I don't want to get
We
too much on that. I want to
we might
keep it
have to
to
do that.
yeah, we might. I want to keep it to representation. So with that being
Yes.
said, let's move to what you were saying about character disabilities, like
Yeah,
mental issues as well as physical disabilities. I think like how does that play out in role play? We haven't talked about that yet.
exactly. That well, I think that there is a certain level that the, I think it is so subjective at that point too, because a part of me is like, oh man, I see a lot of mental disabilities or mental issue problems within RP, but that's because I write sociopaths and psychopaths and narcissists who are on that scale. But are we going to see, dyslexia or, autism? I can't even think of a character who has been autistic as part of their as a part of a definition of like their history and background within RRPs.
Yeah, I mean, even if they were like it, I don't, I wouldn't know, right? Which I guess is
Yeah,
kind of true to,
exactly.
I guess that's kind of true to real life. Like you don't always know, when you're talking to
Absolutely.
somebody that fits that or not. Oh shoot, I don't have
But
enough
if
money.
that's not an intended part of the character, is a representation.
Yeah, I don't
Like
know.
that's another argument too, is that sitting there and being like, yeah, you can have autistic traits in a character 100% be, but like also what are autistic traits? But anyway, that's a whole other
Well, I
subject.
mean, that gets into something that I do want to mention that I think it's really, really important for role players to understand because a lot of times we are doing research to play something that's not our own
Yeah.
experience, right? Because
And
that's
that will
like,
be
and so then like these groups of people that you don't belong to, like they're not monoliths, right? So
yeah.
just because one person experiences autism in this way. I think autism is a really good example of this. Another person can experience it in a totally different way and they're still both validly autistic. Like I don't think it's fair to be like, oh well, they do this or they don't do this, and so that puts them on this side of the autistic line or that side of the autistic line.
Yeah.
It's like it's not like that. It's not like that in real life, and I don't think it should be like that in role play.
Absolutely. And it gets very complicated, and we are going to talk about in depth on the later in this episode, hopefully if we have time. Just because we might make this a two-parter just
it,
because it is
it might
a
have to
lot.
be. There's a lot
Uh,
to say here.
but being able to focus on how do you play a character that is different from your life experience is something that we are definitely going to focus on in the later half of this episode.
Yeah.
But being able to sit there and if you are not specifically trying to actively represent something, I feel like it can't be representation. So you can
Mm,
have autistic traits or hint at the idea of a character being autistic, but unless you're going to like come out and say it, I don't think it counts as representation
mm,
in my opinion.
mm.
If you're not willing to commit to that representation, then I don't think it is part of a character. And I might be wrong on that, which I will totally accept. But a part of me is sitting there and being like, no, we got to own it and be loud if you're going to try to play a character that is marginalized
I
and
think
often made invisible within writing.
I feel like what you're trying to say is you struggle to buy it. Like if they don't make it clear they did it on purpose. That's what I'm
Yeah, I
hearing
mean,
when you
I
say
think
that.
yeah, it is part of the buy it, but it also makes me sit there and be like, it just it makes it feel like it's a cop out, like, oh, I'm trying to be inclusive, but I'm not willing to actually, you know, stand in this. I'm not willing to actually put my money where my mouth is.
Okay,
I'm
I
just willing to
understand.
talk about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, that could also be where I'm at with visibility and wanting to make marginalized people visible in characters and stuff like that. That's where my value is and where I view my power is, and a lot of other allies don't. So
Yeah.
I also recognize that could be very different.
Yeah, for sure. Ty has a really good comment on this. So
Yes.
it's that balance between the character having the traits and slamming the reader in the head with
Yeah.
this character is X. Because when the latter happens, it can feel like, look how edgy I am or look how inclusive I am. And her example is, we don't like to talk too much about her on this, or I don't personally talk too much about She Who Shall Not Be Named, but she's a wonderful example.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say it. For example, J.K. Rowling saying Dumbledore is gay. Like, and that was so hollow. It felt
Oh
very
god.
hollow to me. It felt super hollow
No.
to me, and I know
And
I wasn't
well,
the
and
only
now
one.
well, and I maybe that's a good example too, because now here we are. She says that Dumbledore is gay outside of the realm of her books and outside of the realm of canon, and now we have two movies.
Yeah,
One of
that
them
proved that it wasn't
specifically
true.
around Dumbledore's life that is refusing to come out and say it. That
Yep.
is actively sitting there and being like the closest line sorry, I get really passionate when it comes to this particular author. The closest thing we got to the most recent movie was that Dumbledore sat there and said, "We were closer than brothers." Like, what the fuck is that supposed to mean?
I mean, it's like a classic. It's a classic coding. Things like close as
Exactly.
brothers is what you would say to signal to readers or viewers, hey, this character is gay, but I can't tell you, the censors are stopping me, right? But
Yeah.
it was like 2019 when that movie came
Yeah.
out,
That was
like
last year.
unnecessary in 2019, like
Yeah.
so very
So
disappointing.
I 100% agree with Ty is saying as far as like it is a character, it is a very careful balance to sit there and not like slam your face into a wall and just be like, my character is gay, do you get it?
Mm-hmm.
And also being like, no, he's pretty gay.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
that careful balance.
Yeah, I do think there's a balance there. I guess I understand your perspective with saying like you want it to be loud and proud. Because when it's not loud and you're questioning, like, is this person using some kind of covert coding?
Yeah.
It gives those people that don't support that particular group license to say, no, they're straight. And it's like, obviously not, my dude. But
Yeah.
I
And then
do hate
also,
reading that. I do hate reading that when it's like
and
so
I
clear to me that they're not straight for someone
yeah.
to say it. And then I have nothing in
Well,
canon that disputes that, which sucks.
exactly. Yes, exactly. And I think that that's part of it. And I know that I have a lot of baggage being part of the LGBT community and being like, just give us the goddamn queer characters, please. And say that they're queer and stop lying about it.
Oh my God, the lying.
But or stop like coding it, or stop, queer baiting. That's another big one. Stop queer baiting us.
Yeah.
If you're going to try to be all inclusive and cool, and you think you're being edgy because you're trying to, attract LGBTQ
Oh, Teen Wolf.
people.
Teen Wolf. I'm
Shout out
sorry.
Grey's Anatomy also.
I have something stuck in my throat and it just sounds so strangely
Sounded
like
like Teen
Teen
Wolf.
Wolf. I don't know where that's coming from.
Exactly. If you're going to do that, then like you're not actually being inclusive.
Yeah.
You are just fucking with people.
Well, you're just
CW
saying,
is also great at that too.
yeah, you're just saying like, hey, queer folks, I want your money, but I also want the straight folks' money. I don't actually care about you. I care about them dollar bills. Like that's what you're saying.
Exactly.
That's what you're
So
saying.
so I think that concept also translates into RPing, in that
Absolutely.
we learn, much like with FCs and face claims, we learn from Hollywood how to do that.
We do.
And that is a unfortunate thing that is a side effects, and it exists within RP, that we like to hint around things and not actually. And I think also a part of it is like what we talked about earlier, is that a lot of places people haven't been given room to grow and make mistakes.
Yeah, and so they're scared. They get
Um,
told like write what you know, and
yeah,
they see other people getting dragged for doing it wrong, and they're like, "Well, God, I just want to chill out and have fun and role play. Like I don't want to be like feeling like I'm in a classroom, right? Nobody wants
yeah.
that. So giving people the grace to make those mistakes, I think, is really important.
And unfortunately, certain places in RP history, uh, Tumblr hasn't made that possible, hasn't
Yeah,
made failure and mistakes and learning curves possible. It was, you need to do it this way or you're wrong.
yeah, and that's not good. That's not
And
good.
it is not good. So I think that so I think that, on top of all of this, mental issues, or mental disabilities, as well as illnesses, are also not necessarily represented the best within RP.
Hmm.
I think also those are more, there's more of a tendency to sensationalize
Yeah.
or stereotype, especially when it comes to mental illness.
Hmm.
How many I there were a few, at least on Tumblr, where it's like, "Oh, you're trying really hard to play a schizophrenic character, and I appreciate the diversity. However, you are not doing it correctly."
Yeah.
Um,
But you don't want to like throw that in someone's face because you
oh,
don't want them to feel
absolutely.
like they can't make a mistake, but at the same time, when you see that particular trope get popular, it is kind of disappointing, right?
Yes.
So and I think that's something that we could all do better with, and I know these are bad habits that we learn from Hollywood. Like it's the same thing as all of
Yes.
our other bad habits. Like we learn them from our society and from Hollywood. Um, but I think that we could do better in the sense of like when we talk about mental disabilities or physical disabilities, in addition to showing the parts that are like cute and quirky and interesting, like also show the parts that hurt. Like sometimes like these things are called disabilities because they cause people issues, and I think showing those issues in a way that doesn't shy away from, what comes with that, I do think is an important part of it. And as writers, we can do better of showing the ugly
Absolutely.
side of some of these things, because as role players I think we don't.
Well, and I think that both are true because I also think that there are certain role players and certain writers who show only the ugly side,
Yeah, and that's not
who
fun either.
want to only show the tragedy, who want to only show how miserable and sad, and it's their own like projection and ableism
Hmm.
onto, this, especially I think physical disabilities get the worst of it.
Hmm.
How where it's like a healthy able person is, being ableist in their own trying to like highlight the tragedy of this thing, like, because a person can't walk or can't do this or can't do that. And that's what they're focusing on when it's like, no, this person is a living, breathing human being with complex emotions.
Yeah, like nobody's
And
nobody's good at everything, and this particular person maybe just, isn't good at walking, but that doesn't mean they don't have other joys in life. And I've definitely read books like that before too, that are like tragedy theater, and they don't feel real.
yeah. Ty is talking about in the comments that he is working on a character with schizophrenia,
Oh,
and
she.
that I'm so sorry.
You're good.
That she's working on a character with schizophrenia, and that it's important to make a representation accurate because it is a very complex condition, but it also has a lot of impact on a person's life.
Yeah.
Um, and it also works without a person, like with it works without it. It's a masculine
Because
name.
Ty sounds
Thank you.
masculine. Thank you.
Sorry. Oh my god,
You're good.
my own wonderful internalized misogyny just happened there.
Thank you for the grace,
Anyway,
Ty. We appreciate
I
that.
appreciate it. Yeah, I'm kind of doing the same thing. In Atlantis right now, I am working on a character who has OSS who has it's called OSDD, which is basically DID, which is a subset of dissociative identity disorder, which used to be referred to as multi-personality disorder.
Hmm. Yep.
And wanting to like make an accurate portrayal of how incredibly difficult this life is, but also make a realistic character that also plays into a very dramatic sort of plot line is incredibly difficult and nuanced, and no one is going to get it right the first time. And also it is going to be a little bit more it's going to be a little bit more sensationalized because it's fiction.
Yeah, because it's a
um
story and it isn't real life at the end of the
yeah,
day.
and I'm sure, Ty, you're feeling the same way with writing a schizophrenic character, because it's like this is a part of a person's life. It is not their entire character. It is not their entire being, but it is an incredibly disruptive mental illness and condition that is, like you said, completely complex. It's like, how do you balance that? How do you write an interesting character with a complex disability and also make it that it's fun to write and
Hmm.
fun to like watch this story and unravel what is happening within an RP setting, because it's not even just a movie or a book that you get full control. You also have to make this character likable to other characters to interact with them.
Yep. And I think
So,
and I think that's one of the things that's so beautiful about role play, that's not
yeah,
not the case with some other type of fiction, with a book. Once it's published, and you can't go back, right? It's not right. But with role play, you can just do it again. Like
exactly.
if you feel like you screwed it up, okay, just do it again with a new partner. Just do it again with a new group. Like, do it better next time. And
Or
that's one of the things that I find so freeing about role play is when I make a mistake, there are tools within just the way that role play works that I can go back and do it again and do it better.
absolutely. Um Okay. We're gonna mid plan here for a second. I'm so sorry. We are kind of running out of time. We still have 45 minutes, but I know
Yeah.
we want to talk about fake wokeness, and I know that's gonna take up some time.
Yeah.
So do we want to talk about how to write these characters who have different life experiences than yourself, can we make that its own topic? Because I feel like we could.
Yeah, I think we could. So I think we probably should. We were going to talk about that today, guys, but I think what we're going to have to do is talk about that on a different stream. I do have a video about how to play characters that are not like you and how to play characters that have different skills that you have. So in the interim, those are the resources that we have available for that sort of thing. But I have a lot to say on that, and I don't want to give the the 10-minute spiel because you can watch my videos and find that already. So yeah, I think let's cut that and let's instead just spend the rest of the time talking about the fake wokeness and antis because I definitely want to touch on
Yeah,
that.
and then that will also touch on like fiction versus reality and that,
Yeah.
which I think is extremely important when talking about this.
Yeah. Okay. So then to move into this, I have a thing that I want to say at the beginning. Landon and I both are incredibly pro fiction. We believe you should
Yes.
be able to write literally whatever you want. And I mean that literally. Like the most problematic thing you can think of, you should be able to write it. I do not agree with limiting writers. I don't think that's correct. I don't think that's the way to creative freedom. I think to be able to have full creative freedom and feel and write the things that you want to write to feel proper as an artist, you have to have the freedom to be able to write anything. And I
Yes.
really mean that anything. Whatever you're thinking in your head is like, yeah, anything except that. No, I mean that too. I really mean that too. That awful thing. Like I do. So from that perspective of saying you should be able to write anything, I think that really comes into representation because if you should be able to write anything, like, okay, well, that means I should be able to write something racist if I want to. Yeah, actually, I think you should. I do think you should. But that doesn't mean necessarily that I agree with that stuff bleeding into reality, right? Like if your character wants to throw out some slurs that hurt my feelings, that's your character. And I don't believe that has anything to do with you. But the moment that you bring that over into the out of character realm and it's just me and you talking and you throw out a slur, then it's like, okay, wait, what? Like, because I
I
thought
think
that was your character.
yeah. I think the important thing to keep in mind with this as well that I just want to interject in here very quickly
Yeah.
is that you also need permission from all parties when
Mm-hmm.
writing this.
Mm-hmm.
Even if people say like hit me, no trigger warnings, no
They don't
no
mean that. They don't mean that.
they
Let's be
don't.
real, they don't mean
So
that.
if your character is homophobic, racist, and that is your character, you need to make sure and have a private conversation out of character with the other writer and say, do you want to go down this route? Do
Yeah.
you want to RP this with me? Because this is not me. This is not what I'm feeling. But my character would. Great example, and I'm speaking for someone else right now. But Naomi plays a character who was born and raised in, rural Missouri, which is very stereotypically racist, homophobic, a little bit of sexist.
Mm-hmm.
And so having character disputes within characters for characters who are, people of color or uh, a part of the LGBT community would be very in character for that character.
Yep.
And
Like
if that other
he's
person,
gonna say the wrong thing, right? And
yeah,
he's not gonna pretend.
you as the writer need to give your partner the opportunity to not be involved in a possibly triggering situation
Mm-hmm.
that is going to involve the isms,
Yeah.
because when most people are talking about triggers and squicks, they're not thinking about stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
And so they'll
I very quickly just wanted to make sure that that was in there.
Yeah, no, and I think that's absolutely true because that's something that we do in our role plays. We have a spot for people to put like, "Hey, I'm not interested in this." We call it the Triggers and Squicks channel because we're in Discord, but it's basically a space for people to say, "I don't want to touch this topic." So you'll find things like we have a lot of like older women in our role plays, 30 something women, 20 something women. So what we see often at miscarriage. Miscarriage is one that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
People don't want to talk about it. They don't want to see it. They don't want any of that, right? Which that doesn't
Yes.
mean we don't allow you to write a miscarriage plot. You're more than welcome.
Yep.
But if someone has listed that as something that they're not comfortable with, you don't get to involve their characters in it, right? You're going to have to go to someone else. You're going to have to find someone else to do that miscarriage plot with, because that's not right. That's not fair. And I think the same thing is true when it comes to like expressing things like racism, homophobia, fat phobia, things anti-trans, stuff like that. Like you have got to have that out of character communication to make sure people are okay with that transpiring. Because when it comes to triggers, I do think people say no triggers, but what they really mean is like, I don't think you're going to cross my triggers. That's what they really mean. So it's critical to get that enthusiastic yes. So I'm glad you brought that up because I do think that's true.
Yes. So, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I was just gonna say, and sexual assault is another big one that a lot of people
Oh
will sit
yeah.
there and say, will never possibly think that you as a writer will cross that line. Um, but
But it's also one of the
we
most
have.
popular. It's also that's also one of the most popular, problematic things to write. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that assumption is kind of like, I don't know. That one's one I struggle with. I don't know
Well,
why people would assume that because it's incredibly popular, but yet they do. And so you gotta make sure. You gotta
I
make
have
sure.
my theory on that is why people don't cross that is because I think that while it is popular to write, violent sexual assault is
Mm-hmm.
not nearly as popular to write.
Well,
It
that's true.
happens within RPing, but when people say sexual assault within their squicks and triggers, what they're talking about, I think, is a violent sexual assault scene.
Yeah, they're not talking about
Whereas, yeah,
coercive assault.
coercive or oh my gosh, what is it called when someone is kind of okay with it but not really? There's like a fan
Oh
fiction term
yeah,
for it.
dubcon.
Dubcon. Dubious. Yeah.
Yeah, dubious
Dubious
consent.
consent. They're not talking about stuff like that, which I think it makes up the majority of the
You're
really
right.
popular sexual assaults. Um, but people also don't mention it because people don't think that you're going to write out a violent sexual assault scene
Right.
when you know what, it might be totally within my character to do that.
Yeah. So you got to get consent when you're going to enter into
Yes.
something that's like, there are people that really don't like this. You got to get consent. Now, that being said, like sometimes you're going to mess up and I know I have before. You're going to mess up and think like something is normal and the other person is cool with writing it because we have good divide between fiction and reality. And then you actually get to writing it and you realize during the scene that the other person is not okay with it, or they realize maybe they thought they were okay with it even, and then
Yeah.
once they start to write it they realize I actually am not okay with this. I don't want to do this plot anymore. Like I think it is what we should be doing as role players. I think we have to get better at communicating when someone has crossed a line where it's not 100% their fault they crossed it, right? Like maybe you agreed to this scene and then you started doing it and you don't like it anymore. Like you've got to feel confident to go tell that person like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to finish this scene. Can we just fade to black? Like I think that's something we could all get better at. Is setting those boundaries and recognizing that sometimes it's gonna not be fair. Sometimes it's not the person's fault, but that doesn't mean the boundary's not okay.
Triggers are called triggers for a reason, and that's because a lot of the time you don't know what your triggers are.
Yeah, you don't know. You don't know till
They
you write
come as
it.
surprise. So who knows? There could be like for me, I personally don't have an issue with being called anything like any sort of homophobic slur.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see an issue with a character one of my characters being called that or me calling a character that if my character is racist or homophobic. Um, I personally don't have an issue with that, but also catch me on a bad day.
Yeah.
Catch me on a really emotional time and
And
I
sometimes
might
it does hurt,
no.
right? And
Or
you're like,
sometimes
shoot, that came
or
out of nowhere.
yeah, or sometimes you're used to, the common F one or any of these others and then one comes out of mid sentence, mid air that you're like, I've never heard that one and that one hurt.
Yeah.
And you just have to communicate that. Um but I also think it's really incredibly hard, especially when we're talking about representation and when we're talking about tough conversations like um, racism and homophobic comments and scenes, because it happens so commonly in people who are part of marginalized groups that those who are not part of marginalized groups don't even think about it's an everyday reality.
Yeah.
And I think that that is something also to keep in mind that while as a writer, you are 100% aware and willing, and you have a right to write that, and there is
Hmm.
nothing wrong with wanting to write that storyline. um if the writer opposite you is a person of color, and even in their character is a person of color, they may not want to write that out,
Yeah.
because that is a part of their everyday interaction. The microaggressions are a part of their story, and you're thinking, and it's like, oh, this would be such a great story, and this character is this, and you're making a fictional thing, and they're literally living their life,
Yeah.
because that is part of what is reality for them.
And they're coming to role play to have a good time and chill out just like everybody else is, you know?
Yes, exactly.
So getting that consent, I agree. It's very, very important. And I'm glad you brought that up because I think we could all do better with that. Like we could all do better when we craft our advertisements about being honest in our one-on-one advertisements. We could all do better when it comes to like plotting with each other out of character to make sure that the other person actually wants what we're going to do. You know, it's just like how on AO3, right, when it comes to fanfic, that you know, there's trigger warnings because you don't want someone to accidentally engage with something that is they're really not interested in, right? And I think role plays the same way. It's more about like not wanting people to be subject to things that they really don't want to be subject to. That should all be consented.
Yeah. I think Ty has some really interesting things to say. She was talking about her experience with having a character who was like a massive ass and a sexist, aggressive, rude to everybody, and then how people would basically be like, "Why is your character being unpleasant?" even though they warned them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that happens all the time. Unfortunately, I think that that is one of the things that if you're going to write that character, um, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. I
Is
mean,
is that people are not going to people a lot of writers do not have as great a sense of separation between fiction and reality as we wish that they did.
yeah, and we're all human. Like sometimes we want to have really good separation and we just don't. Like we want to not feel the feelings and we feel them anyway. Like sometimes that's the truth and that's what happens. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I do think that we talked about this in our villain episode. Like if you're going to write somebody that's like that, like you have to be prepared for the consequences. You have to be prepared for the extra work because it is going to be extra work.
Yeah.
And trying to pretend like it's other people's fault, like other people are just doing their best the same way you are. So I don't
Mhm.
agree with that. Like if you're going to play that character, you have to do the extra work to make it work.
Yes, exactly. And it's just part of the burden of knowing that you are playing a character that is not going to be liked and is going to be actively hated.
Yeah.
Um is on you, and it sucks and it hurts, and the best of our peers, it don't play it or put away the character because of situations like that. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, because especially when you're in a community, you don't want to be disliked.
Yeah.
um but it is, I think that it's unfortunate that it's like that careful balance. Like, I understand why other writers um start thinking, you know, negatively about the situation and the character, and that comes over to the writer. But at the same time, it's like, well, there is a separation between fiction and reality.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's a complicated issue.
Yeah, it's complicated and it's a balance, and that's why I think, you know, one of the most important things with this is to have grace with other people because they're going to make mistakes, I'm going to make mistakes, like we're all going to make mistakes. And so I think, you know, that's important.
uh do you want to move into what kind of like the people who really can't separate fiction and fact, aka antis?
Yeah, so there's this whole group of people, which we could probably even do a whole talk
We will.
on this. I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure that we will. But there's
We will.
there's there's a group called
I'm
Antis.
adding it to the list.
Yeah, they're mostly on Twitter now, but
Ah.
there was a time they started on Tumblr. So on Tumblr, the tagging system was crazy, right? The way that you had to tag things, like if you want to talk about a certain character, you're expected to tag that character, right? But because Tumblr's tagging system was so bonkers, if you wanted to say something negative, what would happen is all these fans of the character would see that and get their feelings hurt, right? So you started to tag, so what people started to do is tag things like anti character or anti ship or whatever. And that kind of spawned this group that called themselves antis. And where it started out as being like not into this particular character, not into this particular ship, it's kind of spiraled from there. It's spiraled into people that truly believe that if you write or draw or engage with XYZ fiction, that you believe that is okay in real life. So I'll give an example. Super common. Non-con people love that. People love
Mm.
writing that. They love, watching it, reading it, stuff like that. It's incredibly popular, incredibly popular. And an auntie might come along and say, "Oh, you write rape, therefore you're a rapist." And that's just not true. That's just not true. But
Or
but
you're
that
an
is,
or you're an enabler, or you're a rapist
yeah,
apologist.
yeah, exactly. And it's not true, but it
You're
is
the reason it
what,
happens.
yeah, they conflate fiction and reality when the truth is that the relationship between what we enjoy in fiction and what happens in reality is complicated, right? It's
Mhm.
complicated. You could get rid of every piece of misogynist thing in fiction and it would not solve misogyny. It wouldn't, because these things feed into each other, right? They feed into each other. It's not like misogynistic fiction creates misogyny. Like, that's not how it works. But that's what aunties believe. And a lot of aunties will go to the point of like sending people death threats and just awful, awful things, branding them, basically giving them scarlet letters because, oh, you like this thing that's problematic and that means you condone this thing in real life. But it's just not the case. Yeah, video games make people violent. Exactly. It is the video games make people violent argument. But instead of about violence, which we all know that's BS, like everybody knows that's BS. But for whatever reason, because in the US we are very, we're so Puritan, we're so freaking Puritan in the US, and this is something that could only be born on the US internet, right? Which is where it was born in with, young Americans on the internet. When it comes to sex, apparently all bets are off, right? It's basically like saying because you like furry, that means you want to screw animals. Obviously freaking not. Now, does that mean that there are people that want to screw animals that are also furries? Yeah, duh, sure there are. But that does not mean that because you're a furry, you want to screw animals. That's just ridiculous. And you know when you hear that, that's ridiculous. But those are the types of things aunties believe. So that's my primer on what is an auntie and with the implication of why it's bad and please don't do that. Like, don't judge people based on their fictional interests. So
Well,
that's my
like,
setup.
so I 100% agree with that. I think that there is an interesting, not interesting. I think that, well, first of all, I think that the English, like English studies and literature is to blame, because all we've been taught in high school is to like be like, "Oh, how does this book reflect the times that it was written?" and everything like that, and being like connecting eras and times and the way that social systems were based off of the fiction that was being written at the time.
Mm,
That exists and that happens, right? We write what we know to an extent. And so I can understand why that logic jump is there of, if you are writing this, then you are trying to like deem that this is what is happening, but it's not that simple.
it's
It's like
not.
way more complicated than that.
Yeah, like a good.
And it's a bigger picture, right?
Mm-hmm. Like, I think a really good
Um,
example of where this is obviously wrong is people that have survived certain traumas might want to engage in art about that trauma, and
Absolutely.
and then like so we're gonna talk about something real heavy for a second. So hopefully this is far enough into the video that YouTube doesn't demonetize me, right? But art as therapy is valid, and a lot of therapists recommend doing this. So if you were, for example, a victim of sexual assault as a child, I can totally understand someone wanting to engage with art and writing about that topic. So imagine, like, as an auntie, seeing that and believing that that means you condone child sexual assault. And then what an auntie will do is call that person a pedo. And that is absolutely triggering and traumatic for somebody that went through that trauma. But that's what they
Yeah.
believe, right? And it's anybody that knows anything about therapy and healing processes from trauma and things like that, that is so obviously wrong. That is so obviously wrong. Because engaging with fiction sometimes is part of the healing process. Engaging with the subject in a safe way with fiction is sometimes part of the healing process. That doesn't mean it's part of everyone's healing process, of course. You deal with how you want to deal with it. But for a lot of people, it is. And that's probably obvious to anybody who's been through trauma. And then you want to go engage with the trauma. in an artistic sense. Like another good example. Oh, I wish I could remember the name of the book. There's a book that was a bunch of there was a bunch of like writings from Jewish women that were from during the Nazi occupation. A lot of those stories are about Nazis, coming in and hurting them and sexually assaulting them. And it's a way to reclaim that trauma that they went through. And that's so obvious when you think about it, but that's not what aunties think. That's not what aunties think.
Who was it? Regrowth.
That might be the book. I cannot remember. God, I should have just written it down because I knew I wanted to mention this book and I just didn't. I didn't
That's
write it
fine.
down. So sorry. If
Oh
I can
no, you're good.
if I can figure out, then I'll put it in the comments. So yeah, and I'm sorry to get like super super heavy for a second with those like really heavy topics,
Well, I mean,
but
frankly,
that's the reality.
this is a heavy topic, right? That
Yeah.
this is a heavy topic. And like I said, we could talk about aunties, and bringing this all up in that episode I think would be great.
Yeah.
When it comes to representation and aunties, there is a lot of aunties who want to not overcorrect, but if they feel that you are doing anything incorrect, like I would like, okay, so what I was talking about earlier about Naima and how I used the wrong, that it came to light for me that I used the wrong FC, that the character should have been black when I portrayed her as white. If an auntie got in their hands on that, they would have labeled me a racist
Yeah.
and would
And that
have just,
action was racist, right? But it
oh,
doesn't,
absolutely.
and they're not wrong, but it doesn't help you to be told like, oh, you're a racist for this thing that's fictional, right? That's not
Yes.
real.
And while the action was racist and my internalized racism, being labeled a racist and then having that be spread around the internet,
Mm-hmm.
and having death threats sent to me because of a realization that I then had later about a character wouldn't have helped anybody's growth.
Yeah.
And I know you talked a lot about, especially within the Disney fandom,
Mm-hmm.
that there's a lot of hot takes on what FCs are appropriate for certain characters and what aren't.
Mm-hmm.
And that aunties can get very aggressive
Mm-hmm.
about what character should be played by what actor.
Yeah. And I think that what it comes down to is like they're living, these people that feel these things and think these things, they're living in this hell world just like we all are, and they see the racism and the misogyny and all of these awful things happening, and they want to try to fix it, but they probably intuitively recognize that there's very little they can do about the systems that actually cause, the violence that happens to people, right? But what they can do is bully a marginalized creator on Tumblr. So that's what
Yep.
they do. They can make
Yep.
this one individual feel bad about doing a racism, and so that's what they do. And I
And
used
then they call it allyship.
yeah, and
Because
it's like, but that doesn't help. That doesn't help the people that you're trying to help. It just made somebody else miserable. And to the point, like just to be clear, some of these campaigns against people go so far that people have, this is another heavy thing, sorry about to say it, people have committed suicide over this. They've gotten so
yeah.
many death threats and so much harassment over something that really could have just easily been a private conversation, or the person that was upset blocking them, but they turned it into a harassment campaign, and then that was the
Yeah.
result.
It's that unfortunate thing of call out culture, I think to an extent is a good thing. And I think that's where aunties really believe that they are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
That as an ally, as a white woman, I am to use my power to call out any injustice I see in the world.
Yeah, and like, please call
Um,
out Walmart, or celebrities that are worth $10 million, or
100%.
please
And
call
you know
that
what?
out.
If your uncle is being racist or a fellow RPer is being
Like,
racist,
talk to them.
you can call that out. You can sit there and be like, "Hey, that was really racist." Or that was really sexist, or that's really homophobic, or whatever. And that is where it's coming from. But when it becomes an entire group of people attacking a single person or even another group of people, and sending death threats and you should go kill yourselves and everything like that over the internet anonymously, gets incredibly overwhelming and incredibly overblown,
Yeah.
and out of control, and it spirals, and it's no longer calling someone out,
Yeah.
it's destroying somebody's life.
Yeah.
And no one can grow from a place if they're constantly being bombarded and told how terrible they are. No one's going to grow in that position.
Yeah.
I don't know
Because
anybody who has been put in a miserable abusive situation and grown from it,
yeah, because you
right?
can't, because punishment doesn't work. Like punishment doesn't work, and I'm a big believer in restorative justice, not punitive justice. And so that's why, when you create harassment campaigns against like this artist that has 300 followers on Twitter, like you're not doing anything. You're not doing anything. You're just hurting them.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, so if you really do believe in like restorative justice, then I don't think you should support those sorts of things. And if you do support those sorts of things, I think you need to be honest and say like that you actually don't believe in restorative justice, you do believe in punitive justice, you
Yeah.
know. And that's what you're doing.
Um, Ty just said something wonderful, and that was, I mean, all she says is wonderful, by the way. But
It's true. You've had some really amazing comments this stream, Ty. Thank you so much for joining us.
but basically, that the sum of what she is saying is that there's this like idea held that people are saying something bad, they are doing it deliberately. So that someone's intention of saying something racist is that they're intending to be racist.
Yeah.
When in reality, people aren't. People are going to say, most people, there are of course exceptions, and there are the
Yeah.
people who are saying things to get attention or to draw a crowd or whatever. But for most people who are going to say something homophobic or racist, they're not meaning to. It's just something that has been programmed into their brain.
Yeah, they don't mean it
Uh,
that way. They
they
don't mean it,
don't.
and
And
that doesn't make it hurt less. Like I absolutely agree that doesn't make it hurt less. Like when someone is sexist against me, it doesn't make
yeah,
it hurt less that they didn't mean it. But that also doesn't mean that like it's right for me to send them a death threat, because they did something sexist. It's still not right.
absolutely.
Still not
Or
right.
but it is right to sit there and be like, "Hey, yo, sir, that was right. That was sexist."
Yeah.
Like that, like having that conversation. And most people who, and as Ty finished that thought, most people who are like unaware that they have made something that has a comment that is an ism,
Mhm.
um they are going to they're going to be willing most of the time to have a conversation about it, or at
Yeah.
least hear something. Will it change them? Maybe not,
Yeah.
but it might get them to think about it, or it may have them think about how to say it in another way, or anything like that.
Yeah, like when it
um
comes to education, we both have education backgrounds, right? So we
yes.
we know like it takes the average person 6 times to be exposed to a piece of information before they internalize it. On average per
Yep.
person, average per piece of information, and this is really difficult information to swallow. So I think when we go into these conversations, we can't expect to change people's minds, and I think we need to also recognize within ourselves when it's better to just click block and not have the conversation, because sometimes you don't have the mental energy for it, and sometimes you don't. Like I know I often don't have the mental energy to have these conversations about things that directly affect me, because I'm just too
Yeah,
emotional about it, and I got better things to do with my time. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
so I think you do have to pick your battles in these conversations. But if you are going to have these conversations, like you have to make sure that you come at it from a way that might actually help. Because
Yeah.
if you're not, then all you're doing really is perpetuating the problem, and that's I,
Also,
I hate I hate to say that because I know that these people are trying to help, but they're not.
no, I mean, no, they're not, and that's the problem. And I guess for me, I guess what I'm saying this is that I'm trying to tell people who agree with the antis or have been antis themselves at some point in time to sit there and be like, there are better ways to do this.
Yeah,
There
like
are
if you
better
real
ways to be an ally.
absolutely, if you really want to engage with this type of allyship, there are ways to do it, 100%. Like it's not a lost cause, and you're not wrong for messaging someone and being like, "Hey, that was kind of racist, and I think you hurt some feelings there." And I think that you're putting this out into the world. Like you put out this tweet and it got 1,000 retweets, and I think that a lot of the people that retweeted were racist, and the reason they retweeted was da 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 da. Like those conversations are still valuable to have, but
Yes.
but saying "go die racist," like I don't think that's valuable. I
And
don't think
also,
that's
I think
valuable. Just click block. Just click
yeah,
block.
I also think that those conversations are only I think that like sitting there and sending those sorts of messages are only okay when it's things like racism, homophobia, sexism, anything like that.
Hmm.
Um you if a person is not, inappropriately touching a child, you don't get to call them a pedophile.
Yeah, like if you really think they're a pedo, call the police. If you really think they're a pedo, call the police. And that's really the thing that gets me with that. Like if you really believe that, call the police. But I
And
know
I
I know they don't really believe it. They don't really believe it. They're seeking control in a world that doesn't give us a lot of control. And I sympathize with that. None of us have a lot of control in our lives because of the world that we live in, and it freaking sucks. It
yep,
freaking
and I
sucks to see injustices and know that there's nothing you can do about it. I hate it too, you know?
yeah, and it's terrible, but I mean, I think you said a tweet and I'm going to also expand upon it. It's fiction. No one is being hurt and therefore
Hmm.
there is no crime.
Yeah. Yeah, this thought crimes aren't a thing. We don't do that,
No,
and we don't want to
you
start
are
doing that.
you are not arrested and prosecuted for your thoughts because God, that'd be a terrifying place to be.
For real.
And I've had some messed up thoughts in my life, and I'm very grateful that no one can read my mind or that I
Right.
haven't met Edward Cullen yet. Um,
I mean, I still have messed up thoughts regularly, especially right
oh
now with
yeah,
everything we're going through with COVID. Like sometimes certain things sneak in that I'm just like, "Holy crap, that's wrong." But
you are not your thoughts. Like, here's the thing: you are not your thoughts. You are your actions.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
and on top of that, you are also not your writing. You are your actions.
Yeah.
End of story. And I think America has a very different view from the rest of the world on that. And I think we could talk about this more with aunties and stuff like that, but especially when it comes to certain mental illnesses that
Mhm.
America doesn't even consider mental illness.
Yeah.
And I think that idea, that separation of, again, fiction and fact, fiction and reality, fiction and action, is incredibly important to keep
Yeah.
in mind.
100%. 100%. So yeah, we are very pro fiction. We support
Yes,
you writing whatever you want, but we also do value
literally.
diversity. So hopefully some of the stuff that we've talked about today gives you guys some ideas on how you can both be pro fiction and still allow, some of those isms to exist in your stories, and still like allow some of that problematic and dark stuff to exist in your stories, but still create a game that feels largely welcoming to marginalized people. Because I think we do. We have a lot of marginalized people in our role plays, and I think it's
Absolutely.
it's it's because we do certain things to make them feel welcome. But at the same time, like the goal is not to stifle and to make a pure role play where you're never going to encounter anything problematic, because we think that's boring. Like stories need conflict, and that means you're going to encounter bad things in fiction. So I hope this this helps giving some people some ways that they might could do that in their own role plays, and ways to still do these things without hurting people or stepping on their toes or things like that.
Exactly. My final thoughts are: remember that it is your responsibility to change.
Yeah.
And it is your responsibility that if you want to see more diversity in writing, or you feel that there should be more diversity in characters within role playing, um, bring that diversity.
Yeah, don't expect other people to do it for you, and especially don't expect those people that are marginalized to do it for you.
Yep.
It's
And
wrong.
then also and then also recognize that you can grow and you can make mistakes, and hopefully you find a partner or a group that allows you to do that. Um, and any growth is growth.
Mhm.
And so if you are trying to make a complex character with a mental illness, or a person of color, even though you are not,
Mhm.
learning and researching and trying to just play that character is growth, and
Mhm.
continue to grow that.
Yeah, and give yourself grace. Give yourself grace to be like,
Absolutely.
well, I screwed it up that time. I'm going to do better next time, right? Because you can't do anything about past you. You can't do anything
Yep.
about past you. The best you can do is apologize and do better next time, and understand that, like, those other people might not forgive you, but that's okay. You tried. There's lots of other people in the world. Like, that is what it is, so giving yourself the space to do that, and to make those mistakes, and to just always have your best intentions forward, I think is the best we can do.
Absolutely. And my last bit of last words is also that you are not a terrible person
Yeah.
for wanting to write terrible things.
Yeah. You're not. 100% you're not.
And I
You're
will die on that hill.
I agree. I 100% agree. And I don't care what it is. I don't care what it is. You are welcome to write anything that you want, and it has nothing to do with your real morals. And if you believe it does, if you're struggling with that and you believe it does, then a therapist is a wonderful place to get that, get that handled, because if you are struggling with like your fiction and reality bleeding together and you are thinking some of those things in real life, like there are people out there that are trained to help you with that. So you
Absolutely.
can get that help.
And then also, like, if you're still concerned because you're having dark thoughts or writing dark things and it's not bleeding over, but you're still concerned, any therapist will tell you that you're not crazy. It's fine.
Yeah, everybody does that.
Just so you
Literally
know.
everybody does that. Everybody
Everyone
does that. Like
everyone does that.
your healthiest, most well-adjusted person does that. I guarantee you. They have weird fantasies. They have, fiction that's super problematic that they like. Everyone does that.
Yep.
Everyone likes violent video games or their version of violent video games to some extent, right? Everyone, no matter how pure.
It is very true.
Yep.
So,
Okay. So, whew,
woohoo.
whoa, that was a really
That was
heavy one.
heavy.
I feel like I need to just woosah for a moment, like a little meditation moment. Do we have like something a little bit nice and pleasant to close on? Do we have an article for today?
I have something very pretty.
Okay. Let me save the game and you can pop it in chat and we'll open it up and talk about it.
Okay. I liked that it was heavy though. I like talking about this stuff. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
lie.
I mean it was good. It was good. I think that, this is a really important topic in role play, and I do think it's one of the more important topics that we talked about. And there's so much to say that there's two other topics that I think we're gonna have to add
Yep.
to the list, because I didn't get to say as much as I wanted to about them. Like we didn't get to talk at all
No.
about how to actually play characters that aren't like you, or I really didn't get to say everything I wanted to about Auntie. So those
Yeah,
two we'll have to talk about in the future.
I think as soon as you said that, I was like, "Oh no, this is a 2-hour conversation."
Yeah, it is,
So,
clearly. um,
anyway,
Okay,
so
well,
this
so on to
is
the nicer things. Tell us about this article.
so this is a picture that was captured by a YouTuber earlier this week
Oh,
called the
wow.
giant red jellyfish, and it's all lightning bolts on top of a Colorado mountain. I'm from Colorado, so that makes me a little happy.
Oh,
And it's just so pretty. And there's a little video and stuff like that, but I frankly haven't watched the video to be completely honest.
is the video linked
But
somewhere in here? Oh, yeah, here we go. I'm gonna just play it and I'm gonna mute it so you can still talk, but there we go.
but
Here's the
I
video.
think that it is so pretty, and things like this just remind me that the world is beautiful and that we should, during all of this craziness, and I know that there's so much crazy happening in the world right now with COVID and with political things, as well as wars that are happening in Africa and not being talked about, and natural disasters that are being happening all over the world,
Hmm.
and even the little things of going back to school and Black Lives Matters protests and things like that. There is still beauty, and beauty is happening around us, and I think it's important to see that and remember that.
I love that. Because yeah, things are tough right now. Things are tough right now. We're dealing with a lot in this country. We're really reckoning again, as we have been for a long time, but we're reckoning again with the police brutality that exists in this country. It's awful.
Yep.
We're trying to go back to school in the midst of a pandemic. That's crazy. And still a lot of things are uncertain with people's work situations. Like we have a lot of unemployment right now. That's just awful. So we're all dealing with traumas at the moment. I think everyone is touched in some way. So this is wonderful to bring something pretty, and our planet still does produce like really beautiful things, and it's nice to be reminded of that. I think,
Yep.
in the middle of like, in addition to all this stuff, global warming going on. I mean, poor Texas and Louisiana, the hurricane that just hit them,
Yep.
and it sucks, but there is this wonderful beauty that's happening in the world. This is
Yeah.
magical. I've never seen lightning like this, so this is new
Yeah.
information for me.
It's one of the things I miss most from Colorado are the lightning storms. Is during the summer, it would So Colorado is basically a desert for people who don't know that. People are always surprised to move out there and then realize that it's a desert.
Mm.
Um,
I
it
guess
just
in my
happens to
mind,
be a
in my
fairly
mind,
mountainous one.
yeah, in my mind, Colorado is mountains because that's what South Park told me.
I mean, it is, but I mean those mountains are deserts,
Mm.
and the Front Range is deserts. So in the spring summertime, around 2 o'clock every single day, the mouth of the sky just opens up and it rains hard and fast for about 15 minutes, and lightning and everything like that happens, and then it stops, and then it's 90 degrees again and dry, and it's one of the things I miss most about Colorado, but it is produced some beautiful lightning storms.
Yeah, wow. These pictures are stunning. These pictures are absolutely
So,
stunning.
yeah, and everyone is gonna have something in their backyard and their neighborhood and, their state that is going to be beautiful. So I will encourage all listeners to take a moment at some point this weekend or week to go out and find something and just relax for a moment and separate yourself from what is happening outside, and just remember that, this is a beautiful life and you're living it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Makes me think I need to go visit the ducks at the duck pond again. It's been a minute since I've been
Do
out
it.
there. So maybe, yeah, I should. I should probably go do that. Just enjoy some nature a little bit.
Yep. It's hard when you get caught up in the thick of it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, but this is great. This is great. I love it. Really, really beautiful pictures. Okay, so that was our show today, guys.
woohoo. Enter
Let
stage
me,
window.
yeah, interstage window. So I guess we'll do a little bit of like where to find us and stuff. So interstage window, we have it, live on Twitch every Saturday from noon to 2, and that's Eastern time because that's the time zone I am in, and Landon's actually in Eastern time as well. So you can watch us live on Twitch if you really enjoyed watching the live show. Or even if you just want to support us, please follow. The button for that is down below on Twitch. I'm still a very small streamer on here, so I could use some more followers. So if you would do that, I would be super, super grateful. Um, in addition to that, we also put this show on podcast format. So if you like to just listen to the audio, you can find that on Spotify and where else, Landon?
Google Podcasts as well as Apple Podcasts
Okay, and
and
it
Google.
Okay, great. An interstage window. If you also can't be available during the live time and you like to watch, you want to see my beautiful face and watch us play, Viva Pinata. Someday we'll move from that into other chilled games, but it's always going to be like chill games like that. So if you want to visually see that, you can also find the VODs on my YouTube channel, which is just Karen Terry. On my YouTube channel, I also do a role play help show called Spare Room, which goes up at 2 p.m. Eastern every Wednesday. Those are more like, discrete topics that are just my thoughts on a particular topic and how I deal with it. And then the other place that you can find me in particular is on Twitter. So I also tweet sometimes. I am incredibly pro-ship on Twitter. That's also where every once in a while you'll find political tweets. Not a lot, but sometimes you will find political tweets. I'm quite leftist. You'll see certain things about that. So if that interests you, if that type of content interests you, please follow my Twitter. My Twitter is It's Karen Terry instead of just Karen Terry. Of course, Karen Terry was taken.
Of course.
If you like our podcast and you would be interested in potentially coming on to talk about some of these topics with us, we do allow guests. And if you're interested in that, my recommendation is to join the Discord. Link for that down below. On the Discord, we announce on Fridays what the topic is going to be. And if you'd like to be a part of it, you're welcome to message Landon, or my other co-host sometimes is Naomi, but it'll say in the announcement who it is. And that's actually where we get the audio from, is there. So if you're interested in that, join our Discord. So that's where you can find me. Where can everybody find you, Landon?
You can find me at Landin, spelled Landin, Maine, spelled like the state. And that's on Instagram. Sometimes I tweet, not really, so I'm not going to give you that handle, but you'll find me on Karen Terry's because I'm sometimes clever.
She mostly just
Um,
likes my tweets.
that's typically what it is. I like your tweets and then am I an asshole, which is fantastic.
Oh
By
my
the way, if
gosh.
anyone wants to actually I'm going to give my time to shouting that out. If anyone wants any sort of joy from the internet at any point in time, am I the asshole subreddit and or the Twitter is wonderful
I
and
follow that
full of
Twitter.
assholes.
Oh my gosh, I follow that
Do it.
Twitter, and it is
So that's the Twitter you can follow.
it's wonderful catharsis, and I love that it's a Reddit. So in my mind I can imagine that most of these stories are not real. They're just karma farmers. and I can just enjoy the creativity of what kind of insane story people might build for farming karma, right? So yeah, I enjoy that Twitter in a very like dark cathartic way as well.
It's wonderful. Why not? Let's shout out my book. I have a book if you want to buy it. It's on Amazon.
Oh yeah,
Called
hang on,
Around the World and Back Again.
I have a copy. I have a copy
Oh,
over here.
this is what we're doing. I'm just deciding to go full promo.
Yeah, why not, right? Here we go. So this is a book. What's this? Okay, so this is her book of poetry, right? It's called Around the World and Back Again. I'm not super into poetry, but I have to say, like, as somebody that loves travel and loves exploring other cultures and countries, I still enjoyed lots of the poems in here. So even if you're not like super into poetry, I would still recommend picking it up if you have an interest in travel or if you have an interest in, cultures outside of the U.S., right? So yeah,
Yes,
it's great.
do
It's
it.
great. And it's on Amazon and
Uh,
it's not very expensive, although I don't remember the price, but it wasn't expensive.
I think it was like $12 on Amazon. You can also buy the Kindle version for like $2.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and let's see. Oh, we have an Instagram Enter Stage Window
Hmm.
on Instagram where you can find updates sometimes.
When we keep up with
And
it, right? We're not very good at that, but we try our
yeah,
best.
listen, we're gonna start the routine, and so hopefully once I'm back into school mode, things will actually start getting done again on a
Yeah.
reasonable time level.
Yeah, because you'll have to make yourself a
And
schedule, right?
it's something.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's all for me. Oh, also, if you want to become a Patreon supporter for Karen Terry, you should do that because she's
Oh,
wonderful.
yeah. So how we fund both this stream and the show Spare Room is through largely through my Patreon, which is also linked below. At this point in my life, I have a day job. Landon also, has a day job in school that she's doing. So every single bit of proceeds that comes through that Patreon goes back into both Spare Room and Enter Stage Window. So if you
Yeah.
like the show, please become a patron and support us.
And I think that's all I have.
Okay. All right. Well, that's our show. Thank you so much, everybody. And don't forget, of course, to make it a great day.
Yeah, and don't forget to be awesome.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.